Thanks all of us for coming back to this session of the International Conference on the Holy Grail in Excellent and High Impact Research, Publishing, and Proposal Writing. This has been organized by the International Center for Research and Human Development, Dominican University, Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria, in collaboration with the African Higher Education and Research Observatory, UK. And the keynote paper is about achieving global excellence in advanced research methods, academic publishing, and proposal writing. This event has been convened because there are issues or problems that are leading to current failings in traditional academia. And these are the root causes of many countries of the global south remaining underdeveloped many decades after independence. So in this workshop and conference, we are looking at trying to lay bare the success tips that are not necessarily taught in standard research methods texts. The understandings we are trying to calculate cover things like understanding users, for instance, and stakeholders that benefit from high impact education and training. We also want to manifest instruments and techniques that can be used to achieve global excellence in these three main areas of the corporate academic game. There are a couple of pre-readings that we have sent out to delegates. And if people have not received those readings, then we are going to send it to them after. There is a Google form going around where they can put their details. The purpose of this is to ensure that we understand the kind of systems that can be used across academia, industry, government, and wider society in order to mobilize effective higher education competencies and skills amongst knowledge workers. And by knowledge workers, I mean the students, for instance, who are the primary stakeholders in learning, the academics, younger senior academics, or beginning academics, or mature academics, professionals that come into higher educational institutions to update themselves or to work together with, scholars on issues that they are encountering in their areas of work, which is again across these four domains we call the global cure helix, the academia, the government, industry sectors, and wider society. We've been looking at some aspects of how we can use corporate academic, tools to enhance the impact of the papers we write, and some of the new or novel approaches that are enshrined in AfriWorld journals, which belong to the AfriWorld Publishing Company or firm. One of the interesting things we want us to look at is how really are academic papers innovative or not innovative enough? And what do we mean by that? Are there frameworks for writing high-impact articles, for instance, research monographs, thesis, best-selling textbooks and superbooks, which can enable learners to master innovative skills in research, in teaching, learning, assessments, high-impact consulting, and wider real-life applications? I think there are. Are there also good practices and case studies in proposal writing we can emulate? And also best, there are. Have we done that? We have. So this is the core of what we are trying to look at today. Now, in terms of how we are looking at beneficiaries, of course, I've mentioned some of the stakeholders already. Those stakeholders involve also not only academics and postgraduate students, they also involve institutional trainers from universities and polytechnics in Africa, developing countries, and globally. What do I mean by that? That if people receive this kind of training, they are empowered to also run seminars in their institutions, cascading the skills to other academics and students. Directors of research and innovation across academia, industry, and government will benefit. Why? Because the corporate academic research system or enterprise developing system is the bridge that connects the town and gown, that connects what is going on inside institutions of higher learning and the world across those 4 domains we talk about. And if you remember that these, directors are actually managing companies in different industry sectors we talked about, or managing ministries, working with ministers and working with government in various government departments. It becomes important, therefore, that a model of education that mandates that connection as of habit and doesn't leave it to the whims and caprices of individual academics should be instituted globally. And I think that's what we're trying to do. However, how do we do these things? We do them by the kind of, frameworks and ideas we've already shared at the beginning of this conference. Because if you look at the conference normally, typical conferences, we position a keynote paper sometimes at the beginning, sometimes not necessarily at the beginning. But we have a reason for doing it almost in the middle of the entire day, because we needed to offload all those systems or ideas that underpin global corporate academicism. We talked about, for instance, the corporate academic and research and enterprise development philosophy, which is a current philosophy. We talked about the 5 forces and 7 E's of education. And these are actually the bulwarks of what it is to be a global corporate academic. So we are doing the keynote paper now, resting on the foundations of what we called before, so that it's not sounding as if we don't understand what the keynote paper is about. So it is positioned logically in this very time. But let me go in to talk about what we envisage to be happening, to be honest. What has been happening in traditional academia is that academics have been incentivized wrongly to some extent to pursue fairly personal agenda of getting promoted, because that's normal, that's interesting. Everybody wants a career progress. But we feel that that incentivization is slightly dubious, as I use the language, because it takes them away from looking at those elements or areas of the world that they need to connect their disciplines with, or explore the affinities between those areas and their fields in order to make wider impact. And that's why we're in this game today. And the tools to do that do not necessarily mean that good practices in current traditional setups should be jettisoned. They don't have to be, but we are building on them in order to strengthen their capacities to add value to the real world. And then, what are the main, perspectives we are looking at? We are looking at perspectives where in every department, in every higher educational institution, there has to be a center for the application of every discipline. So if you take any discipline, for instance, statistics, there has to be a C for ed in statistics. Every discipline can now say a center for the application of statistics, So you can put your own discipline into it and call it a name that reflects that department, real estate, anything, history. Why are we doing that? Because ordinarily in traditional academia, we have what are called research and consulting units in some departments. Some departments don't even have those. So where do we start from? Let us suppose that there is in a department a research and consulting unit. The traditional ones are the ones where academics lead it and just come and grab some projects in, occasionally grab 1 or 2 students to do and give them stipend. It's not formalized to be part of the furniture for actually training these spirit beings we call global corporate academics. Because of that, it's haphazard, you see, and it doesn't actually move anything. It doesn't move the needle when it comes to the socio-economic development of a nation or even a continent. Are we surprised, therefore, why most sub-Saharan African countries are still underdeveloped after many years of independence. I'm not trying to actually bully Nigeria, but I'm using it as a big guy, one big giant of Africa. 220 universities approved by the National Universities Commission. More than 60 polytechnics approved by the National Board for Technical Education. Roughly 10,000 professors, NUC approved. So if you make a simple rough estimate that, okay, if other ranks in these universities, for instance, are 3 times the number of academics, professors, you get 40 of them, 40,000 of them, added to 10,000, you're looking at 10,000, 50,000 academics sweating the little stuff in their departments while the country is sinking. It's not a good story to tell anywhere in the world. If we are not concerned about this, I don't think we know what we're doing. And that is why we have to take this game seriously now. So a model that can actually combine what is going on now, all the best practices or good practices in traditional higher education, with the capacity to impact society across all those domains we talked about, across all disciplines, is very important. So let me take some of those things to pieces. Let's take them apart a little bit. In academia, you do the stuff of normally teaching, research, and consulting. For instance, the consulting is not really happening well enough, as I say. But let's suppose those other things are working well. What about integration of knowledge? Because the 4 main areas we are trying to innovate form what is called the riot ensemble in global corporate academicism. And it's talk about research, integration of knowledge, applications, and teaching. Where we fall on the swords, or our swords, in these 4 areas, actually the 2 guys in the middle. The integration of knowledge, fondly called I of K, and of course the applications. And this is why, because they are not happening well enough, the students don't have the skills to go out and confidently even start something for themselves, or even if they get employed, they don't start adding value immediately until the companies start reinvesting a lot of money to train them up again. This should have happened in the C4S. If they had a center structured the way we are talking about, they could have learned how to do things even before they come into a company. Of course, they have to still adapt to the particular way the company does stuff, but they have the base knowledge to start adding value almost immediately. But that's not happening at all. They can't even self-employ themselves anyway. And we have we are sitting on a time bomb of generations of graduates that are not employed. It's extremely unfortunate. So what we're trying to do in these conferences is to galvanize a new way of doing stuff that I talked about. If you go to applications, okay, fair enough, a little bit. Those that are in professional subjects, you can say they do the application. Or even in the laboratory sciences, like doing the lab work and all those things. The point is, do they even have the equipment to do it well? There's no way a government in the world can provide everything. If you doubt me, just go to universities in UK and see the amount of money that the likes of Cambridge and Oxford are generating on their own from the knowledge that they are actually cascading. Why are we not doing it? Of course, we need government support, but we ought ourselves to be able ourselves to originate ideas that can actually bring in income. We cannot bring income by leaving students more and more money to pay, for instance, and so on and so forth. So that's the problem. So in order to make it clearer, what I'm trying to posit is that there is a way you can make a lot of income in a department without even depending on any government money, if it comes to that. And of course, you have to do it in a way that actually rewards the rainmakers, the academics that are doing this type of connections and bringing in the income and making those connections. You don't have to overmanage them because somebody is sitting on top as a vice chancellor and then limiting the capacity and initiative of those people. Therefore, you force them to just do their own bit and forget about wider game. So that's what I'm saying. Okay, now let's come to the teaching now. The teaching is not properly done. Why? The teaching is too traditional. You can't stand in front of students in a 60-minute talk, lecture and talk for 40 minutes. No, you don't do it. So the teaching should be so minimal that it's at the back. You could have wondered why I did not say research, teaching, integration of knowledge, and therefore application. I put the correct order now. The teaching is at the last. It's the last because I am working on what is called reverse pedagogy. Okay? A pedagogy in which the teaching is minimized and the activities are maximized. So if I come in a standard class to teach my disciplines, I expose students interactively to a lot of research that has gone in around the topic I want to do, case studies, bring a lot of things together, integrate a lot of perspectives, resources and ideas, case studies, papers. And then I get them to start bombarding themselves with those ideas. I wouldn't even do much work, to be honest. Put them, and they're doing it as if they're building something out of it. They're creating products and services. A very active way to learn, kinesthetically involved. It draws them into the game of using knowledge actively. Of course, I'm not, therefore, a sage on the stage, but a guide by the side. Closer to the end of that 1 hour, what do I do? I just use about 10 minutes to say, okay, what have you learned, blah, blah, blah. And they then see that their learning is self-directed, student-centered, self-led. But in that 10 or 15 minutes when I'm summarizing, I will use IFK capacities to bring in a comprehensive, more or less, assemblage of all the constructs and their interplays that make them actually able to galvanize what they're doing. And that makes it easier for them to learn those things. It is the best way to teach the likes of Bill Gates, Elon Musk, the rainmakers at, we meet at Goldman Sachs, investment banks, the guys that know how to create value in organizations. I wonder why academics, especially senior ones, cannot do that. They are properly positioned to do it. Why are they not doing it? You see, because of the wrong incentivization, the rat race to get to the top. And when people get to the top, what do? They stop working. They start looking for rank positions. So that is, I'm not saying those things are bad, but we need to think closely about whether they actually help. They're not even financially empowered doing that, because how much is coming when somebody is a dean? So that's what I'm saying. So it's not going to be a long keynote paper, because we have already offloaded a lot of pre-readings. And the last time I counted, not less than 10 papers have been sent to all the delegates. Okay. It's about opening our minds to new ways of thinking. And of course, all the other things I'm going to say are covered in other sections before the end of the day. For instance, the system of research that we're going to use, that is governed by what is called the research methods canvas, will be taken apart in a subsequent section. The 5 forces and 7 E's that actually stand in as the mechanics for producing those kind of artifacts, those kind of, products and services that enable us to achieve what is called the Oseloka's dream are equally explored. And come to think of that dream, to be honest, or vision, if you remember that I repeatedly talk about the capacity for a knowledge production system to be spirit-led, that is, I'm talking about fairness and equity. Project-based, so where academics in those centers in the departments are bringing in myriad projects from different directions, and students are fed fat on practical realities of how knowledge is deployed. These are the things we're talking about. So you find out, therefore, that within that 5 forces system, you also talk about user research, ability to understand who you want to sell something to. Even when you want to sell yourself to a company to get employed, don't you actually go to their website and study what they need? And you come and say, I can solve this problem for you. If you can do that for yourself, why can't you do it normally within a center for the application of every discipline? So some of the things I'm talking about are not foreign. It's not that we don't think much about, stretching them into other crevices of life. We have to start doing that. Life is total. You can't leave it in isolation, to be honest about it. So this is what we're talking about. Within that 5 forces, we also talk generally about, skills mobilization. under the platform SSGS Academy, the skills for students, graduates, and startups. There are a lot of skills we need to develop around what is called also 7 E's. The 7 E's, of course, embody expertise, experience, entrepreneurship, enterprise development, employability, emotional intelligence, and execution. Within execution alone, you can pack a lot of things there. You can pack something like, delivery systems, things like agile, for instance. Upon all they talk about agile, the truth is the small W agile that works, because you have to structure what you're doing in the law. The lack of structure makes things to collapse in the middle. But in order to say that it's all about agile, well, we just say agile. Project management, for instance, strategic intelligence and thinking, these are all part of execution. There's also service science, which is key analysis and how it can be used to, improve performance of systems. So let's just call it execution. So all these 7 E's are actually the best set of E's that can enable us to train somebody totally. But what is going on most of the time in centers for entrepreneurial studies or even the ones in big universities are just the entrepreneurship, enterprise development, nothing more. Occasionally employability. What about the other 4 E's that can complement the game? So we need to bring them in, and so on and so forth. If I remember the other facets of what we want to talk about, they involve, how do we choose the best projects to do that will have the maximum impact? We've already covered that in a section devoted to what is called the sweet spot principle. The sweet spot principle is literally what it means. It's a sweet pot. It has a lot to give us. It's sweet. But how do we benefit from it? These are 3 elements you must master in order to actually choose topics correctly. Topics that can travel, that have profound impact. 1, can you identify a problem that is universal, pervasive, that affects a lot of people, possibly millions or billions, depending on the level of the global care helix that you are working on, whether it's national, continental, for instance, global, state, regional, and so on and so forth. That can determine number of numbers. They are just used as examples. The reason for that is that if you can solve that problem, therefore a lot of people will benefit. Their needs will be assuaged, for instance. Their pain points will be reduced. Their value increase, and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying actually is that understanding user research is part of the 5 forces, and so on and so forth. So it's a game in which we want to make sure that the very best forms of knowledge are brought together in order to impact society. Second element is, can you determine why your new solution is better than existing solutions, or what gaps are they closing, and actually what new functionalities are they providing compared to what exists, if there is an existing solution? And do those features matter? Because if they don't even matter, you don't even need to go to that level. There are functionalities today that are in mobile phones that lots of people don't use. So you have to think through. It's not everything that looks new that you have to work on. Finally, you have to be able to demonstrate that what you produced is superior to what exists. And for that, you need ability to use some business numbers to make a business case for why your solution is superior to existing solutions. And that is actually a summary of the sweet pot principle. I want to promise that some of the things we listed in key outcomes have been mapped into separate sections today. When this particular session ends, the next session will involve, a 15 minutes interactive discussion where we start asking questions and answering questions about how these things play out in our own disciplines. I want to recognize the fact that we've been joined by Professor Nnamdi Madiche, who is now a professor at Kigali and the director of a center there, one of foundation members of the SSGS platform in WhatsApp, facilitating a lot of events in 2021 for us and continuing to work with us. He set up actually our SSGS Academy in LinkedIn, and is one of the co-heads of it with myself. I want to thank him a lot. And I want now to thank all of us for coming today just to exchange these ideas and be able to move them into our own disciplines and continue to work with us even after this event in continually thinking and improving how we apply the ideas in our own specific disciplines.